It's go time.
Welcome to Quick Kicks, everybody. I'm Don Charbon, and today we have a very special guest from the CFL Statistics Department. It's Jeff Krever. Jeff, what is your exact title with the CFL?
So my title is Senior Director of Player and Game Statistics.
And what does that entail?
My primary role is to oversee the collection of data across the league. So that's in 9 CFL stadiums with all of our stats crews. Our stats crews are made up of 5 or 6 people on each crew, and they're collecting data in real time. We're auditing that data and then working alongside Steve Daniel, who you probably all know, working out of Vancouver. I work out of Toronto. Along with our associate Doug Page. It's a collaborative effort. The three of us are always auditing, and then as well as managing our historical data archives, which are quite vast.
I can imagine with a league this old and this storied, as it were, that's quite an undertaking.
Yeah, there's a lot of history, and the crazy part of it is we're always adding more. And the clubs always want more, right? The clubs are a big part of that. A big part of what Steve and I do is we serve the clubs. They come to us all the time with requests. They want as much info as they can to give them an edge. And we serve them all equally, right? If one club asks for something, we provide the same data to all the teams as part of our weekly reporting process. So the data that we have and the archives that we have that go back so far, we're always expanding it every year. We're adding new little details, things that can inform clubs, inform media, anyone that's interested. So it just never stops growing.
So when you say that you're adding to it, what processes are undertaken to do that? Are you having somebody say, look, I've got a bunch of these documents from the 1935 season. Would they be of value, or is it some other methodology that you employ?
When we're adding, it's more in the up to the moment, right? In a current season. For example, one thing that we added a few years ago, we started to look at directional punting because teams were really interested in the results on punts that were going inside of the numbers or outside of the numbers. Another one that we had for a while was pressures. We stopped doing that at one point, but we did that up until about 2017. Pressures on quarterbacks, right? When a defensive end or defensive tackle, somebody gets a pressure on a quarterback, but we felt that there was too much discretion involved in that, right? And there's no black and white definition of what's a pressure or what isn't a pressure. So just things like that. We try and add what we can. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but the clubs certainly always have input on that.
That's fascinating. So basically you're taking data that you already have and you're digging deeper into it and saying, well, we need to pull this from it and this from it because maybe the Red Blacks needed this. Okay, let's say that the other 8 will probably be interested as well.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Fascinating. So what got you into this in the first place? Like, how does a person move through life and finally get to where you are?
Well, I've had a bit of a winding path, for sure. I actually went to school for journalism. So ending up in stats is, people go, well, how did you get there? Went to school for journalism, started out in content. I was hired in 2012 as an intern, with the league, did a lot of work with the website, editing, writing copy, marketing side, working with our marketing department. I take a lot of pride in the work that we did with some of our gaming products, for example, fantasy or CFL Pick'em. I was around with the league during both of those launches, which were really great products for us, and had a lot of engagement with fans, and which I've really enjoyed playing as well over the years. In 2018 or so, I was approached by the league and by Steve Daniel as well, about whether I'd be interested in a move from content to statistics. So I was interested. It was a great opportunity for me. I'm a huge sports fan, not just football, but hockey, baseball, anything like that. And stats is a big part of it for me. I'm always tracking stats. A big fantasy player and everything. I've got NFL football playoffs coming up right now. So I'm all right into that. All of those things. So for me, it was a no-brainer, and I ended up moving into stats, kind of making a transition from content to stats and doing both roles for a little bit. And then I made the full transition by 2020, working alongside Steve. So that's kind of how I ended up here. So big content and journalism guy coming out of school, there was an opportunity, and I made the most of that. And I think a lot of skills from a journalism degree are transferable to a lot of things, right? So that ended up taking me into statistics, and there's still a lot of storytelling involved with what Steve and I do today. That's a really big part of the role. So I feel like my background there has really helped me end up where I am. But at the end of the day, if you're really passionate about something, I don't think you need to have any boundaries or to fit into a specific role necessarily. And a lot of people in our office that they're very good at a lot of different things.
Now, let's move from that path and into another one. Let's take a typical week in the Canadian Football League from, let's say, last season, 2022, where it's Monday morning. What is the first thing you need to do to get the week started?
Well, for us, Monday morning is coming off a weekend where during the season we've worked all weekend. You're talking about 10, 12-hour days at least on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, because game time we're auditing, then we're inputting analytics after the game, then we're doing more inputting all day on Sunday, right? So Monday morning we come in with meetings, we discuss the weekend's games, we do evaluations of all our stats crews. They're evaluated for their performances, which we share with the crews, and then we also, between Monday and Tuesday, we're reviewing stat changes that come in from the clubs. The clubs each week will request any changes that a player would like on a tackle or something like that. A lot of them don't get changed. They just want us to take a second look, say, hey, tackles are one of those things that we get the most on tackles, but tackles are one of those things that there's a lot of discretion there. You can have 2 or 3 guys that are in on a tackle, and unlike in the NFL, we don't, or college, we don't have tackle assists or solo tackles. We just have tackles. It's trying to choose one guy out of a handful. If something's obvious, we'll make the change, but if not, we'll go with what the crew had called and what was audited during the game. But those changes usually come on a Monday or a Tuesday if they're applicable. And then throughout the week, it's a lot of data entry, game notes. I'm not sure if you've seen our game notes packages that we send out each week. But Steve and I spend a lot of time assembling those in terms of inputting data, printing the PDFs, as well as putting together storylines and notes for the media. And those are really important to us because they inform media on storylines, and they help put our league out there a little bit and generate some of the great content that you see around the CFL. So after that, it's pretty much getting ready for the next week. For the first part of the year, we have Thursday night football through the summer up until September. So that's pretty much what a week looks like.
You mentioned game notes, and I'm a subscriber. And it's kind of a twofold approach where you've got analytics for the league and what teams are doing as a general construct, and then individually what teams are doing play by play or down by down.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And it's not just media. The clubs really use them too. The teams rely on them pretty significantly in addition to what they already have. Most clubs have analytics people now on their staff. So it's just one piece of the pie in terms of the data, but we get a lot of questions each week about things that go into those, and the teams and media really find them useful. So we're really happy to do them.
Now, you mentioned Thursday night football, and let's start with Thursday morning. You wake up, you have a game that night. Let's say it's Edmonton in Toronto. What is going on? Are you having to make contact with anybody? Are you going to have to talk to the crews that are going to be working the game? What's going to be happening right off the top?
Yeah, so we have to go into our stat system and make sure that the game, from a technical standpoint, is set up and ready to go. We check lineups. We have an early check, usually the morning of the game, to make sure the rosters have been imported from our roster management system into our stat system. On game night, half an hour before the game, teams are required to finalize their rosters, and they submit those rosters. We get a copy of those. And again, we're checking to make sure that everything is accurately entered into the system. We also have a pregame call with our stats crews that are on site. Again, the stats crews are on site in each stadium during the game. And then Steve and Doug work out of Vancouver, and I work out of Toronto. So we're connecting on Zoom before each game, about an hour before, to meet and make sure everything's ready to go for the game. So that's what a typical game day looks like.
Now, do you stay in the league office? Do you go, let's say if it's Toronto or Hamilton, do you actually make it out to the stadium? Or what is your role when it comes to that type of situation?
I'll visit on occasion. A big part of my role is supporting the crews with any training that they need, best practices. We meet with them regularly to go over any rules interpretations. There are a lot of incredibly challenging rules to interpret in our rule book, and in NFL and in NCAA as well, where there are a lot of moving parts, and the crews are making a determination in a split second in a game. And not just that, but there are also 7 or 8 other things going on at the same time on a play, especially with some of the more complicated plays. Where a ruling is required, a decisive ruling is required, and a thorough knowledge of the rule book is needed to do that. So our crews are great. The work that they do is just incredible. The challenge of the job, I mean, it's to me, it's a lot like officiating, where it's not something that they get to go and do every single day. That they're working on average once every couple of weeks for 5-6 months in a year. So to just turn it on like that and be so efficient at what they do with such a high degree of accuracy. And this year, we grade the crews on accuracy every game, and the accuracy that we've seen from them is the best that we've ever seen. It is just an incredibly high level. So, I just want to give a shout out to them and all the work that they're doing on site, and all of our CFL support staff. But yeah, to make a long answer short, I do try and spend some time with the crews, but for the most part, we try to leave them alone. If they have questions, especially during the game, we'll try and answer them. We're in constant communication with them, but we let them do their work independently, offsite, and just audit from afar, and then report to them after the game, and let them kind of do their thing while the game's actually unfolding.
So when you say audit from afar, does that mean you're sitting in front of your computer, you've got the game on one screen, and you're watching for inputs on what that play was called? Audit as it goes, or how does that work? Yeah,
we audit in real time, multiple screens. It's like mission control. And I know I think Steve has even more screens than me. I think he's got 7 or 8 or something in his office, but I usually have 3 going, but, we'll have the television broadcast, which is good. But we also have, a system set up for streaming the game on multiple angles. So we can see all 24 if we need it, which is helpful for where the ball is being spotted. Shows the 20-second clock, shows the game clock at all times, because we're always recording the time at when the ball is being snapped, and when each play starts, when each play ends, and so on. So looking at multiple screens and then auditing in real time. We end up changing very few things through the course of a game, but sometimes in the heat of a moment, the crew needs a little bit of backup. Something gets missed, or sometimes there's a fumble and there's a crowd around the ball, and it's hard to see who forced that fumble, right? You've got a massive pile of football players there and big equipment, and hard to see numbers sometimes. And that's where having those multiple angles and being able to slow things down and review can really make a difference. Because the only changes we're making after a game, kind of like I mentioned before, are usually coming from the teams, where a player says, "Hey, I thought I deserved credit for this tackle or that sack, or I thought I deserved credit for a knockdown on this play." Because other than that, we're getting everything in real time. If something's off, we're fixing it pretty quickly.
So at halftime, what is happening? Are people taking a break and going, okay, I got to re-energize, we got another 30 to go? Or are you sort of like doing a peer review again before you step into the third quarter?
It's a quick meeting with the crew. They join us on Zoom for a quick kind of debrief, let us know if anything is concerning or if they're having any issues or if everything's all clear. And then from there, the crew will usually take a short break. And then on the audit side, we're actually either me or Steve, one of the two of us each game is manually auditing as well. So we're writing everything down and then we're turning that into analytics after the game. So we're also turning that into, second down conversion rate and distance. What are some other good ones? Passing depth. That's a big one that we try to keep. And that's all been done manually, at least up until now. We're constantly writing as well, and we take halftime to try and make sure that everything's balancing right. Make sure that the total yards matches up for both sides, team losses, passing and rushing, all of those things. The right number of first downs. Sometimes you can have a penalty that negates a first down, and the system doesn't catch it properly. So we're able to go in and say, okay, we need to override that. On this particular play.
Game ends. What is going on next? Because I know you got to punch stuff up to the website. There's a lot of moving parts, I imagine, at that moment.
Yeah, again, it's a similar process in terms of balancing the game. That's the biggest thing that we do is make sure that the first downs and the total yardage adds up properly. We go through all the individual stats and make sure that everything looks to be where it should be. No odd players or odd statistics in there. And once we're 100% confident in the post-game stats, we basically hit complete. The post-game sheet is sent out to media and to all the clubs through an automated email. And that's the end of the process. We'll have a brief post-game call with the crew just to get their feedback. And we take all of that into account, of course, when we're evaluating the stats crews as well and grading their accuracy, just any factors that may have caused them any issues after the game. And that's pretty much it. That's our game night routine.
And then I guess the complicating factors are when you've got double headers and perhaps triple header.
They make for long days, especially when you have the 9 hours of football, the triple headers. But we handle it very well. We're very well equipped to handle it for a couple of reasons. We really trust our stats crews. They've done a really great job for us, and they're very independent. They could easily get through a game without us, but that audit process is obviously still critical to what we're doing. But we're able to lean on them a lot. So on a 9-hour game, you have crews that are getting through a game without making many mistakes and without us having to go in and take plays over or fix things up. It really makes a big difference for us. And that's where our crews are at. And then the second part of it is between me and Steve and Doug Page, who works very closely with us. Between the three of us, we've got a lot of ability. And those two especially, I mean, they've got so much experience doing this. Steve's been doing it for over 15 years, and I know Doug's been at it since the 80s. So I'm still learning every day from those two as well. But I've pretty much been doing every game now for the last couple of years since COVID-19. So, those double and triple headers, they end up being a lot of fun. We really enjoy what we're doing, and it doesn't become too much of an issue. Even with the overlap, we had some overlapping games last year, and we make the most of it. We really enjoy what we're doing.
What was the biggest challenge for you when you started this? What was the hardest thing for you to get your head wrapped around with stats?
Just the volume of stats, just the stuff. There's so much stuff, and a lot of that is Steve. I mean, Steve's mind is very unique. He's the knowledge that he has and what he's been putting into this over the last 15 or so years since he started with the CFL. He's built such an incredibly vast archive and stats offering. So when I first came in, there was a lot to wrap my head around for sure. But one of my first year here, I went out to Vancouver and I spent some time with Steve, and We worked on a lot of those things, and I just absorbed as much as I could, as quickly as I could. And, by kickoff in the first season, I felt like I was pretty much up to speed and ready to go. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of hours. And at first, maybe there's a second where you think, well, what the heck am I doing here? But the biggest thing is once you start getting into actual games, and it's a lot of fun. You just really start to enjoy it. It all starts to make sense. Every aspect of the job, I really love it right now. Those days from when I first started, and it seemed like a lot, they're definitely long behind me. One of my favorite parts of the job is when we get media and coaches and they reach out and they ask questions. They have stats requests, and some of them are really tough. And the odd one we can't answer. That happens sometimes. But I love researching, and I love chasing down some of those more difficult queries, and more often than not, we're able to help people out with what they're looking for.
That's the journalist in you.
That's it. Yeah.
Now it's off season. What do you try to do? What do you hope to accomplish in the off season prior to training camps? Do you look at agendas and say, okay, this is something maybe we could put in the stats package? Do people come to you with ideas and you try to work through them?
I think we get more asks and requests from people in season. So we're kind of adjusting on the fly during the season. Sometimes we'll table something and say, hey, let's look at this in the off season. But the biggest thing in the off season is inputting. We have a full season of data now at that point, once the season is ended. So it's catching up on entering to our historical archives, all sorts of team and individual level statistics, career stats. We have our own internal stats database that we keep separate from what's on CFL.ca. Stat systems will come and go and things like that, but we want to make sure that our information is 100% accurate and verified. So that's a big part of our off-season process. We're currently in the process of again inputting all of our data, auditing, making sure that everything matches the single game data that we get from throughout the season before completely finalizing our stats reports for 2022. And then that's pretty much it. The next step after that is working on the CFL guide. That's a really big undertaking. It's a massive 300 and something page book that we put together every year. It's available for free on CFL.ca digitally, and we send a limited number of copies out to media and our broadcast partners, of course, at TSN every year. But that's a big off-season project every season as well. And that's the main focus of the off season. Of course, also whenever there are, we do what we can to support our football operations department whenever there are off season rules discussions and rules changes and things like that. We had a few last off season, and they tried to lean on me and Steve when they could for any relevant background and research on that, because that's a really significant process on the football operations side of it as well.
When you're talking about teams and rule changes, when they come to you, they're not looking necessarily for strict numbers. They want interpretations. They want to know that last year, for instance, they moved the kickoffs back to the 30, and they want to know from you, well, if that changes this, what else will it impact?
Yeah, it's all statistically based, but you're right. There's some interpretation or hypothetical situations involved. And yeah, it becomes, if we get rid of the 5-yard, no yards penalty, how is that going to impact the number of penalties that are in a game? How does that affect scoring? Things like that. And moving the kickoff was another example that you just mentioned. That's a great example too. We believe that did help with scoring, certainly improved field position. You probably noticed that after field goals, when teams had the option to receive a kick or scrimmage from the 40, teams consistently chose to scrimmage from the 40 this year, right? Because that field position, 5 yards of field position is significant. Over the course of a season, that leads to a pretty big uptick in points production. So, things like that. We get asked about, what if we move it this many yards? What will be the impact? And we have those discussions all the time. And a lot of times it won't end up leading to a change necessarily, but it's certainly something that people want to be informed of.
When do you start feeling excited about the new season? At what point does your juices start to flow and you go, we're into a new year. Let's get going now.
I mean, I probably by January, that's why last year was so weird, because we ended in December. That was an odd one. And it made the off season a little bit shorter, but, the December, I think I don't want to speak for Steve too much, but I think we're both pretty tired and ready for a break, enjoying the holidays and stuff with family. And, but by January, I mean, it's, when you do this for so many years, you just love the game and love football. And I think by January, I'm ready for it. I just did my 10th Grey Cup this past month in Regina. And I'll tell you, the feeling of a game day, it never changes. I think I felt the same waking up the morning of my 10th Grey Cup as I did my first Grey Cup. It's just it's in terms of it being a special day. And I almost feel the same on opening day, for the opening kickoff that morning, waking up, it feels like a significant event. It feels like a really special day, and you look forward to it all day. And it is really meaningful. So sometimes that feeling doesn't really sink in until the day actually comes, because you spend so much time in the month leading up to it, getting ready for it, that you don't really have time to let it sink in that, hey, this is back now. We're going to be able to watch football again.
Speaking of the 2022 Grey Cup, the emotional roller coaster of the last 3 minutes, how do you become dispassionate about what's going on the field when you're seeing something incredible?
It's I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's actually pretty easy to do, because you're just so caught up in what's happening in the game that you get into a routine, and you're just going from play to play, and every play is another play. You don't really have time to let it sink in what's happening. I mean, 2017, I'll always remember that one, because that I was actually doing content still at that time. I was writing a recap. I wrote the recaps for Grey Cups for so many years for CFL.ca, the post-game story. Calgary was about to win the Grey Cup. All they had to do was not fumble, right? And Cassius Vaughn takes it for 100 plus yards for the fumble recovery, and Toronto ends up winning in one of the most ridiculous in-game turnarounds that anyone's ever seen in any sporting event, right? When you're writing a recap, your whole story changes at that point, right? It's like, when a game goes to overtime or there's a last second victory, like, it's okay, well, so much for everything I've written so far, because this game has just taken a completely different tone. And you're typing and looking at your story. And I didn't even look up at that moment to kind of let it all sink in. It's just right. And I feel like it's the same way, maybe reporters can relate to this. I feel like it's the same way with stats. I was in the press box in Regina for that game, and you could definitely feel the gravity of what happened, but you're so involved with making sure you get every stat on the play and making sure every stat is right. Okay, who had that block? What's the interpretation on this play? That you just move to the next play, which, by that point, the second block kick, the next play was, I believe it was a kneel by Chad Kelly at that point. But it's kind of surreal. And you realize that after the game, I think. And in the weeks following, I watched a full broadcast. I finally got to see the full broadcast a few days after the Grey Cup, just to enjoy it in a different way, and I usually try to do that after the Grey Cup. And you see a lot of things that you realize you didn't notice when you're keeping stats and watching from the press box during a game.
The Argonauts have been involved the last 2 times that they have been involved in some amazing games. Yeah. They seem to bring out the craziness in the Grey Cups. I don't know what it is. Of course, we had an Ottawa Calgary one that went to overtime as well. We had Winnipeg and Hamilton in overtime. At the Grey Cups over the last several years, they've been some of our best games. So as a league, we've been very fortunate. Just incredibly entertaining Grey Cups lately. Genius Sports came on board last year.
Well, we work very closely with. We're incredibly excited about that partnership, and they know a lot about the tech side of things. They have a lot of expertise on that, and I think that's where they're really going to guide us. There's not really a whole lot I can say right now about some of the projects that we're working on, but behind the curtain, there's a lot happening. We're talking to them. I know that I'm talking about them about stats related projects pretty much every week. So they've got some really bright people over there, and I think they're really going to help us as a league. It's a tremendous partnership so far.
You're excited now for 2023. It's going to be a brand new season coming up in about 100 days.
Yeah, that seems soon now when you put it that way. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Schedule just came out just as we were setting this up, and it's time to start making plans for next summer already. Pretty amazing.
Anything that you want to accomplish next year? Is there any?
Just keep being more accurate on the stats side of things. I think we reached new heights last year in terms of what we're doing statistically. I think as we continue to work with Genius, we're going to be able to expand our offering. So I think there's going to be a lot to be excited about in that regard moving forward. And I wish I could say more about some of that, but I hope the football is really good. It was amazing in 2022. It was one of the best seasons that I've seen since being with the league. You know, really exciting. The quality of our players, I think, is greater than it's been. The entertainment value. I mean, this is a great league, and I'm really excited about what the next season's going to bring. You know, a lot of really high scoring games, a lot of really close games, last second finishes. And we keep that stat inside the last 3 minutes. Games decided in the last 3 minutes, and a good portion. I think almost 2/3 of them were decided in the last 3 minutes this last year. So I think as a league, we're going to keep getting better, and that's what I'm most excited for in 2023.
It's been a while since you've been on a podcast. Thank you so much for joining this one. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Don. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean and can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Follow us on Twitter at Third Down Gamble. Join us again, the Third Down Gamble podcast, audio worth watching.